Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Mills. I'm interviewing for a couple of teaching positions at the Stride K12 online program. And I just wanted to take a second and introduce and discuss some parts of my lesson that you're about to watch after this little video here. My lesson is based off of something that I did last year when sometimes we were in person and sometimes we were remote. We used a lot of Google Classroom setup so the kids have access to show me their little video faces. They can turn their mic on and off. They can type in the chat. They have a little raise hand button if they have a question or they need me to go back and address something. So the lesson I built for this video is kind of based off of that, how we were doing it before. I'm a music teacher. I do band at this moment, so the lesson is band focused. And it can apply to anybody, but I've been focusing on band. And it was a way for us to start learning some note names and practicing them without actually being in person and doing it on their actual instruments. So I thought that would be a good thing for us to kind of work on here in our video. Some other notes about how we kind of differentiate and we keep it interesting and we make sure accommodations are met. I've had kids in the past who need pre-written notes or pre-filled things, kind of to take their note-taking burden down a little bit. So that's something I've done before. I will go ahead and draw out some staff lines, or I might even just pre-print some for them and fill in certain parts, and they can kind of fill in the blanks as we go along. They can draw in their own note names. They can draw in the letters, anything that they need like that. That's the biggest one, especially when we're learning this new stuff. And I try to also incorporate lots of ways for us to represent it differently too. That's kind of a big part of music because obviously we perform. So I like to do a lot of body motions that kind of help us represent. Maybe if you don't want to speak the answers, they can represent it on their physical form, whatever we're learning at the moment. I like to play a lot of games with them. There's a lot of games where we're jumping around on the floor, which is something that will come later, kind of after this lesson. One that we start to demonstrate in this lesson is a hand game that we play, where we use our hand to visually represent some of the note names and things that we're learning. So we don't play the actual game in this lesson, but you'll kind of see the example that I started to put in the slideshow. So those are the ways that we like to change it up, and we do this constantly for the first year or so in this program. So it's something that we start small like this, and then we just keep building it from there. Always do the games, always do the stuff as we start to add and get more difficult. So this is the introductory step. The lesson you're about to watch is introductory to starting to learn note names and music and things like that. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, welcome back to music class. We're going to pick up with our previous conversation about how we're going to start reading some note names on our musical staff, okay? So yesterday, or the last time we met, I started talking to you about how we set up a musical staff. You've already been reading some rhythms and some different types of notes, and we've been practicing our clapping and our counting and our beat keeping. So now it's time to take it to the next level, and we're going to start giving our notes some names, okay? This is important because our music, in order for it to stay interesting and exciting for us to play, it can't just stay on one note the whole time, right? I want you to think of our favorite song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Well, maybe it's not your favorite, but it's one of my favorites. So if you think about Twinkle, Twinkle, if we sang it all just on one single note, it would sound pretty silly. It would sound like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder what you are. Boring. We don't like that kind of twinkle, twinkle, right? So we need to do some different kinds of note names. We change the pitch, which is the way the note sounds. We move the pitch around a little bit so that it gets some more interesting sounds going on. So instead of that, we're going to move the notes up and down. And it'll sound like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? The version that we all know and love. So we're going to keep moving. If you remember before, we talked about how many lines and spaces we put on there. We do a little bit of our treble clef, which we'll go back through here really quickly. I'm going to move my little head bubble out of the way here so you can see what I have made for you. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to stay up here in the corner. And we're going to go through this one more time. So our goal still is to continue learning how to read our musical staff. It's kind of been our big focus of reading note names note types like counting and rhythms and all that good stuff, okay? So our target today is that you'll be able to give the lines and spaces some note names, and we can start changing our pitch around so we can make actual songs. Okay, so our Michigan State standard that we've talked about before, which is what the big guys are telling us, this is what you should be learning in music class. Down here at the bottom, we're going to learn and use a system to read pitch notation in various tonalities, which just means we're going to learn to read different pitches and different note names on our musical staff in lots of different patterns. Okay, we're going to learn our basic pattern today, and then as we start doing harder music, we'll change the patterns up a little bit. Okay, so let's get started. We already talked about our main points here of how we do musical staff. There are only so many letters that we use to make up a musical staff. Okay, imagine if we tried to use all 26 letters on a musical staff. That would get so crazy and overwhelming, and musicians are a little bit lazy, so we like to make it easy on ourselves. Okay, so we only use 7 letters. That's 10. 7 is right here. Okay, we only use 7 letters, and then we start over again. Okay, so we're going to use the first 7 letters, make it even easier. We're going to start at the beginning of the alphabet, and we use A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 7. After we get to G, it just starts over again. Okay, we talked about that way at the beginning of the semester. Okay, and how many lines are on a musical staff? You can either show me in your camera here, you can give me a number, or you can type it in the chat. I'll give you a second to do that. Good job. There's 5 lines, right? 5 lines right here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We always go from bottom to top. Okay, and since there's 5 lines on our staff, how many spaces do we have in between? Channel your memories from our last class, see if you can recall that, or if you know how to cheat it and count the lines and line it up, how many spaces are in between? Yep. See lots of 4s, lots of 4s. That's a good sign. We definitely have 4 spaces in between our 5 lines, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I already explained this a little bit, but why do we need different notes in music? Okay, think about music and what makes it interesting and what makes it fun, right? Like Twinkle Twinkle. We need different notes so that we're not just playing one single sound for the rest of eternity, right? We want our music to move up and down and have some contrast and some fun style and fun sounds in it, right? So we need to change the note names a little bit. Can't just leave it in one spot and call it good. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to learn all the options for note names and how to put them on a staff, okay? So here's the basics. You hopefully have already finished drawing your 5 lines and you have some left over from the last time we had class. We want 5 lines straight across your paper. If you like to use notebook paper like me, you've already got some lines set up here for you. So you can just draw some nice, even, long lines across paper. We want it to go from one side of the paper all the way to the other, okay? They should be not too far apart, and they definitely should not be too close together, right? We want space to write our notes in between. So I'm going to draw some 5 lines over here. You can go ahead and do the same thing if you ran out of room after our last lesson, okay? You got 5 lines across the top of your paper. Mine are not perfect because I am a human being, but that's okay. We're doing our best. All right, so if you have leftovers, go ahead and use those, or you can draw some new ones while we move on here. Okay, I just drew an example from our slideshow. Okay, and this is what we already talked about as well, but you can remember your 5 lines and 4 spaces because it looks like your hand, right? Our 5 fingers make up our 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in between each of those 5, we've got 4 spaces, okay? So if you forgot, hopefully you didn't, looked like most of you remembered, you can look at your hand if you forgot, just like we do with everything else in Michigan, right? Okay, so some more basics. We started learning how to draw a treble clef. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to start first. A treble clef is just how high or low we're playing in the grand scheme of music, and treble clef is up high. So we use that for instruments like the flute or the clarinet or the trumpet, anything like that. So we're going to use a treble clef, and we started to draw them. There's one for you there, but I also included our little drawing diagram from our worksheet before. Okay, so I like to do mine this way. We start from the bottom and go up to the top of the staff, and then we kind of come down and around. And we make sure that our big swirly part swirls around that second line, okay? And it goes right at the front of your paper. That is not a perfect treble clef. Don't judge my music drawing, but that's where it belongs, okay? You can draw a couple if you feel like you need to practice that, okay? Go ahead and put one at the front of your line. And every time we make a new 5 lines and 4 spaces, every time we make a new staff, we always put a new treble clef at the beginning, okay? So, like we talked about previously, here's where we're getting into some new stuff. So you want to start writing this down as we go along. Music only uses the first 7 letters of the alphabet. If you think about your alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that's it. That's all you get. Okay? So we're only using those 7. And each of those 7 has a very specific place on our treble clef staff, which is what you have drawn here and what I'm going to be putting up here to show you. Okay? There's our 7 letters. And the magic of music is that once we get to G, we've gone through A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It just starts over again at A. As we keep going up or we keep going down, always just starts over at the beginning again. Easy peasy. Okay, we like to make life easy for us when we're in the music land. All right, so here's the new stuff. So here's how we're going to remember the lines and the spaces. We like to break it up. We don't want to just go line space all the way up because that's way too much to remember right at the beginning. So we're going to break it up and we're going to use our silly sentence to help us remember. Okay, there's lots of options for what you can put here in this little sentence, but this is the one I like to use because burgers and fries are one of my favorite foods. So obviously that's the one I'm going to use here. And we go from bottom to top to remember the order. Okay, so you can get your hand staff out here if you want to follow along with me. From bottom to top, we have every good burger deserves fries, okay? And we use the first letter from each word to be our note name, okay? So the E would go right here, the G would go here, B, D, F, all right? And that's where our notes go, right on those lines, and I'll show you that here in just a second, okay? So you can write that at the top of your paper if you want, so you can help you remember it. You can write it underneath here when we start drawing notes. Whatever helps you remember is good with me, okay? And so what I want you to do on your notes is to make one of these drawings. You're going to put a whole note, which we've already learned about, is going to go on each individual line from bottom to top. And I want you to go ahead and also write the note names underneath each of those notes, okay? Go ahead and take 10 seconds to do that if you need to. I basically just copied what I'm seeing on my computer screen here. I like to keep my notes handy because we're going to use it later when we play a game. Okay, so that's how we remember it. We go bottom to top. Every good burger deserves fries. You can also use every good bird does fly. You can use every good boy deserves fudge. There's lots of options, but burgers are my favorite. So that's the one we're going to use. Okay, so that's how we break up the lines. We like to learn it by lines and spaces just to make it easier on our brains. Okay, part 2 is that we're going to name the spaces because there's 4 spaces in between of the 5 lines, okay? So if you want to draw another staff underneath on your notes, you can. If you ran out of space or you want to just write it right next to it, that's okay too. Okay, instead of using a silly sentence for this one, we actually just use an easy word, one word all by itself. And we use the word face, right? We go from bottom to top, F-A-C-E, right? The spaces, I always remember it because space and face rhyme. So when I'm like, what are the names of the spaces? I just remember what rhymes with space, and it makes face, okay? So from bottom to top, just like we did, F is down here, A, C, and E, okay? And here's what it looks like on the staff. So you can go ahead and draw in some whole notes on each of your 4 spaces there. All right. And the last step we need to do is to look at how it looks all together. Now, you don't have to copy this if you don't want to. It's kind of a lot of writing. It's a little bit redundant to have to write it all again. If it helps your brain remember it, by all means, you go for it and write it, okay? So we're going to line all the notes up from bottom to top of our staff, right? We start on the line because that's at the bottom. We go from line, and then we go to space, then line, then space, line, space, line, space, line, space, all the way up into infinity, okay? But on our music staff, that's only a few. We don't go all the way to infinity right here, okay? So we start from E, right? If you look at all the lines, we have E, G, B, D, and F still, right? And then we just put the spaces, we fill them in the middle. And this is what it looks like going from bottom to top, okay? There's all of our letters right there. Okay, if you want to copy it, you can. You don't have to, of course. Okay, I'll give you just a second to look at that. Oopsies, moving my head bubble around here. There we go. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to play a game. Okay, I put it on our slide so we can keep using this for tomorrow, but we're going to play a game that involves your hands. So you can practice with your hand staff tonight while you're working on your homework and your worksheet, okay? And just like we talked about before, we're going to use our fingers to represent our 5 lines, okay? And we're going to use our 4 spaces in between to represent our F and A and C and E, which I also have for you on your little hand here, okay? So we'll finish our game tomorrow when I see you again. So we can keep practicing our note names. It just takes lots and lots of practice over and over. So we're just going to do it a lot. Okay. So your job for tonight is to work on your worksheet that's in your packet that I sent home with you. So there's two halves of the worksheet. One half is going to say, here are a bunch of notes on the staff. You tell me which one, what name each note gets, and then you write it underneath, right? So if it's on the second line, you're going to write a G underneath. If it's on the fourth space, you're going to write an E above it or underneath it, okay? So that's part one. Part two is that you are going to, they're going to give you the letter, and your job is to write the note where it belongs on the musical staff, okay? So I'm going to give you some time to work on that while we're here in class. If you need to, if you need some extra help, of course, you can jump into the chat, say, Ms. Mills, I need some help. Or you can turn your mic back on, turn your camera on, whatever you need. I will be here. You let me know what you need, okay? Otherwise, I will see you at our next session. Have a good rest of your day.